By July 29, 1944, Vladivostok Airfield. Dawn bleeding across the Pacific horizon. A single American bomber, its silver skin streaked with salt and exhaustion, glides in low over the Soviet Far East. Its engines cough, struggling. Its pilot fights the controls. The crew, worn and wounded, brace for impact. The aircraft hits the runway hard. Tires scream. Metal groans. It skids, veers, and finally grinds to a halt under the rising sun. A U.S. Army Air Forces B-29 Superfortress on Soviet soil. Soviet guards surround it within seconds. The Americans step out, stunned and silent. They do not know it yet, but they have just delivered the Soviet Union the most advanced bomber in the world. Before we begin, if you want more untold stories like this, the hidden engineering battles, secret missions, and Cold War origins buried inside World War II, make sure to follow, subscribe, and share this documentary. Every voice helps preserve history before it disappears. By mid-1944, the skies over Japan grew deadlier. American crews flying the new B-29 were pushing the bomber to its limits, launching missions from bases in China and the Mariana Islands. But Japan's vast defensive ring made every sortie a gamble. And one danger was worse than enemy fire: running out of fuel before reaching friendly territory. Under international law, any American aircraft forced to land in the Soviet Union, and the USSR was not at war with Japan, would be interned. The crew neutralized. The aircraft impounded. But for Stalin, that was an opportunity. He knew the B-29 was more than a bomber. It was a leap in aerospace engineering. Pressurized crew cabins. Remote-controlled turrets. The right R-3350 engine. An aircraft capable of carrying the atomic bomb. The Soviets had nothing like it, and no amount of intelligence gathering could replicate the aircraft without a real specimen. Plans were incomplete. Reconnaissance photos were imprecise. Stalin needed the aircraft in his hands. In July 1944, he got one, and then two more, then a fourth. For B-29s, the most advanced heavy bombers on Earth, fell into Soviet custody. What came next would reshape Soviet aviation. The Tu-4, their reverse-engineered B-29, would emerge from this moment. But before that plane ever carried bombs, it carried something far stranger. A bomber built to destroy cities, reborn as a rapid deployment assault platform. At first, the Soviet Air Force, known as the VVS, didn't know what to do with the captured aircraft. Marshal Alexander Novikov walked around the first interned B-29 like a man studying a new species. The wings dwarfed any bomber in the Soviet inventory. The landing gear looked alien. And inside, automatic fire control systems years ahead of anything the USSR possessed. Stalin demanded a copy, not an imitation, an exact duplicate. But there was a problem. Replicating the B-29 would take years. The USSR needed a stopgap. A way to use the bombers now, even while disassembling every panel, wire, and rivet in them. What could the Soviets do with a long-range, high-altitude aircraft capable of carrying massive payloads, but unavailable for combat? The Soviet airborne forces, the VDV, were elite, mobile, and central to Soviet rapid response doctrine. But they lacked a strategic transport aircraft. Their largest platforms were slow Tu-2s and limited payload TB-3s, both vulnerable, outdated, and insufficient for modern mechanized airborne operations. Imagine deploying paratroopers across Siberia, or reinforcing the Far East against Japan, or preparing for the post-war redivision of Asia. The B-29 offered something the Soviets had never possessed: a high-speed, intercontinental airborne deployment platform. Inside Soviet command circles, the idea grew quickly. The bomber would not drop bombs. It would drop men. By June 1945, near Khabarovsk Airfield, wind whips across the airfield. Rows of paratroopers, steel helmets gleaming, stand ready. The American bomber looms behind them, red Soviet stars freshly painted over the U.S. insignia. The side hatches have been stripped, internal bulkheads modified, guide rails installed along the bomb bay. Inside, engineers shout final checks. Engines roar, for deep thunderclaps shaking the tundra. The B-29 was never designed to carry troops. Its pressurized compartments were tight, its floors not reinforced for infantry masses. Its bomb bay open to the elements. But Soviet engineers found a solution. They turned the bomb bay into a paratrooper deployment chamber. The doors could open mid-air. A narrow catwalk became an exit ramp. A web of harness points lined the interior. The engine screamed to full power. The aircraft shudders, lifts, and climbs into gray Siberian skies. Inside, 24 Soviet paratroopers sway in the dim red light. Breathing heavy. Hands clamped around static lines. The smell of oil and metal filling the cabin. At 2,000 meters, the signal light flashes. The wind howls as the bomb bay doors split open beneath them. One by one, the paratroopers leap into the void. Boots slicing through rushing air. Parachutes snapping open across the horizon. Below, officers track every canopy, every descent, every landing. For the first time in history, a B-29 has deployed airborne troops. The trial is a success. Another flight follows. Then another. Soon the B-29s, still officially interned American aircraft, become the fastest troop deployment platforms in the Red Army. For a brief moment, these bombers serve a role no American mission ever envisioned. Within 2 years, the Soviets unveiled the Tu-4, a near-perfect replica of the American B-29. Thousands would be built. Some would carry nuclear weapons. Some would become reconnaissance platforms. Others early warning aircraft. But before any of that, before the Cold War dawned, before the arms race consumed nations, the very first Soviet-operated B-29s carried neither bombs nor cameras. They carried men, young Soviet paratroopers leaping into wind-torn skies, from an aircraft built by the nation they would soon regard as their greatest rival. A bomber forged for war, repurposed for airborne assault. An American machine reborn under a red star. History rarely moves in straight lines. Sometimes, it takes the shape of a silver giant landing unexpectedly at dawn. From a forced landing in Vladivostok, to the creation of the Tu-4, to the first Soviet paratrooper drops from a captured American bomber. This is how one aircraft bridged two empires. A reminder that technology, once captured, can change the world in ways no one planned. For B-29s, the most advanced heavy bombers on Earth now sat behind Soviet barbed wire. Their crews interned in Central Asia. Their airframes sealed away. Their secrets exposed, one rivet at a time. Stalin issued a quiet order. And so began one of the most ambitious reverse engineering operations in aviation history. The creation of the Tupolev Tu-4, the Soviet clone of the B-29. Because in the years that followed, under the pressure of a changing post-war world, Soviet engineers took this American masterpiece and reshaped it into a machine built not for bombing, but for deploying entire battalions from the sky. A bomber turned paratrooper mothership. A weapon of total transformation. The war in Europe ended in May 1945. Japan surrendered 3 months later. The world exhaled briefly, but by 1946, tension froze between the victors. Washington and Moscow no longer faced a common enemy. They faced each other. The question that haunted both capitals was simple. Who would dominate the skies of the post-war world? For the Americans, the B-29 remained the backbone of long-range power projection. For the Soviets, their heavy bomber fleet was obsolete, slow, fragile, aging. The Tu-4, their newborn B-29 clone, was the only aircraft capable of reaching London, Tokyo, or even Alaska. But Stalin wanted more than a bomber force. He wanted mobility, a way to drop not just bombs but men, equipment, entire airborne brigades onto foreign soil. The Soviet High Command saw the future. Airborne warfare would define the next conflict. Yet their transport fleet, Li-2s, C-47 copies, could not carry enough weight or distance. They were vulnerable, underpowered. The Tu-4, however, huge, long-range, pressurized, rugged. It offered a possibility no designer had dared propose. Turn a nuclear-capable bomber into a strategic paratrooper platform. A weapon to deliver shock, not fire. Surprise, not destruction. But to get there, Soviet engineers had to challenge the very identity of the airplane. Bomb bays had to become drop bays. Weapons systems had to be ripped out. A bomber designed for 9 men needed to carry up to 40 fully equipped paratroopers, or heavy cargo, or even airdrop vehicles. And in the winter of 1947, a quiet directive was issued from the Kremlin. Prepare the Tu-4 for airborne operations. The bomber would be reborn. Transforming the Tu-4 from a precision bomber into an airborne assault carrier demanded a complete reimagining of its purpose. Bomb bays designed for 10,000 kilograms of explosives would now hold paratroopers, cargo containers, and jump gear. Pressurized cabins built for high-altitude bombing would be reworked to allow rapid deployment at low levels. And the aircraft's most defining feature, its internal catwalk and bomb release mechanisms, would become the backbone of a new Soviet airborne doctrine. Engineers from the Tupolev Design Bureau gathered inside a closed hangar at the Zhukovsky Airfield. Blueprints covered entire walls. 3 captured B-29s stood disassembled nearby, silent, silver tutors from another world. Chief Engineer Pavel Sukhoi, invited to advise on airflow and structural stress, summarized the challenge in one sentence. A bomber throws death downward. We must teach it to release life instead. The room fell silent, because releasing life meant, at 400 kilometers per hour, at altitudes far below what the Tu-4 was built for, paratroopers would be fighting the slipstream of the most powerful heavy bomber in Eurasia. One mistake in design, and they would be torn apart midair. Still, Stalin wanted results. He wanted spectacle. And above all, he wanted reach. So the Soviet Union moved forward. Blueprints were drawn. Structural tests began. And by 1949, a radical new variant took shape. The Tu-4D. The bomber was evolving. August 12, 1950. Tula Airborne Training Grounds. A hot, windless morning across the Russian plain. For Tu-4D's thunder across the horizon. Engines howling. Soldiers on the ground shield their eyes, watching silver shadows grow larger above them. Each aircraft carries up to 24 fully equipped paratroopers, or armored cargo containers, or heavy weapons packed into drop canisters. Inside the lead aircraft, Captain Anatoly Vechinin gives the order. Paratroopers rise from their benches. Webbing tightens. Hands tremble around static lines. The bomb bay doors, never meant to open at this altitude, slide apart with a groan that echoes through the fuselage. Wind screams inside. Temperatures plunge. And then, one by one, Soviet paratroopers leap into the void where bombs once fell. The slipstream slams into them, hard, violent, but the redesigned exit rail works. Chutes bloom behind them, white against a blue, endless sky. From the ground, it looks like an entire regiment descending from a machine built for another war. A weapon repurposed. For the first time in history, a heavy strategic bomber had been successfully transformed into a mass airborne delivery platform. The demonstration ends with a roar of applause from Soviet commanders. Reports are filed. The political impact is immediate. The Tu-4D becomes a symbol, not just of reverse engineering, not just of Soviet aviation, but of a nation determined to shape captured technology into something entirely its own. By the early 1950s, the Tu-4D had flown dozens of successful paratrooper operations, each mission a testament to Soviet ingenuity. What had once been a symbol of American air power now served a completely new purpose. A bridge between nations, a tool of mobility, a demonstration that technology knows no loyalty. On the ground, veterans who had leapt from the silver giants recalled the sensation with reverence. The raw power of engines beneath them, the wind tearing at their uniforms, the thrill of seeing the world fall away as the ground rushed closer. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was history in motion. The Tu-4D never dropped atomic bombs, never carved a path of destruction across foreign soil. But it did something equally profound. It proved that a nation could take the tools of its enemies and turn them into instruments of its own strategy. In the decades that followed, the Soviet Union perfected its airborne doctrines. Tu-4s and their successors transported troops across Siberia, Eastern Europe, and beyond. Captured and repurposed technology became a cornerstone of Cold War aerospace innovation. History rarely moves in straight lines. Sometimes it bends unexpectedly. A bomber lands at dawn, a captured aircraft becomes a paratrooper mothership, an enemy design becomes the seed of your own power. The story of the Soviet B-29s reminds us that innovation is as much about imagination as it is about mechanics. About seeing potential where others see limitation. About reshaping the past to serve the future. A Tu-4D soars above the plains of Russia, engines roaring like ghosts from another war. Below, paratroopers descend in perfect formation, white canopies blooming against green fields. It is a moment of elegance, of precision, of history replayed. The bomber that once carried death now carries life, opportunity, and a legacy. And in that transformation, we see the enduring truth. Even in war, ingenuity can rewrite the rules. And that is how the Soviets repurposed a B-29 for paratrooper operations. A story of ingenuity, audacity, and the unforeseen paths of history.